Welcome to AI for You. Today's prompt is about using ChatGPT to help with translation. If you're an institution that needs to target audiences in different languages, AI can be an incredible tool to help with the process. It's important to create a comprehensive prompt that takes a variety of factors into consideration, like tone, formality level, and specific types of languages that might need to be preserved or fixed, like legal terminology or jargon, respectively. As always, be sure to check out the full prompt in the show notes. And remember, when using AI, be sure to validate and test the outputs with an expert or native speaker. Today, I'm talking with Joyce Peralta, Manager of Digital Communications at McGill University. I know Joyce has some excellent AI use cases and brings a unique perspective that we haven't addressed on the show previously. Let's jump right in. Welcome to AI for You, the go-to podcast for higher ed professionals looking to integrate AI into their daily work. I'm your host, Brian Piper, the Director of Content Strategy and Assessment at the University of Rochester. Join me every other Thursday for practical uses of AI within higher education communications, marketing, and student engagement. We'll focus on ways to quickly integrate AI into your teams to increase your efficiency and effectiveness and help you optimize your workflows and processes. I'll interview experts and feature relevant use cases with the goal that every episode gives you at least one thing you can take away and start leveraging in your job today. AI for You is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joyce.
I'm glad to be here, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about some of the ways you're using AI at McGill?
We recently did a survey of our community of communications folks at McGill. So we have a few stats. We know that about 80% of our communications folks are using AI in their processes, with about 40% saying they're using it weekly. And so that was the majority of, or the largest number of people were saying they were using it weekly. And then we had about, I think, 10% saying they were using it daily. So even though people are using it, the frequency of their use isn't a huge thing. Not yet. Anyways, I think people are still in the phase where they're experimenting and considering how to use AI to make their processes more efficient. So there's a few things that I think are very popular in terms of how we're using AI. We're a bilingual university, an English-speaking university in Canada's French-speaking province. So a lot of translation work is being done using AI. And then there's some other probably more typical uses that we hear about at other institutions as well, I'm sure. Things like answering questions and summarizing and formatting content, generating outlines for projects and articles, things like that. So I think from a day-to-day perspective, from a general use perspective, those are the things that I most often hear about in terms of how people are using AI.
I know you are talking about next week different ways to use AI to help create user journeys and help better understand how your users are like moving through your content. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, that's unique to the work that I do. This year, we've had a lot of really interesting user journey projects and extensions of that to service blueprint projects where we are looking at mapping different audience groups in our institution. The big one that we're really excited about that was recently finalized was our digital student journey for our current students, and it maps their journey from the time they arrive at McGill and get used to using our systems and our websites and navigating their digital journey through to their graduation. And we extended that to include not just the experiences of our students as they interact with our different websites and web services and web tools, but also the staff that support those websites. So you see the student journey, you see all the ways that they're interacting online, you see their thoughts and feelings and actions about their experiences using those different tools. And then you see the experiences of staff who are supporting students in using the tools or helping them find answers to questions. For years, I think, in terms of creating journey maps, we've been using things like AI tools for generating transcripts, for translation. So that part isn't so new. I think we were using those tools way back in 2018 or when we started journey mapping. But there are other ways that we've been experimenting lately with using it for journey mapping and user research. So we might, for example, or we have used it to identify common themes and categories of content in interview transcripts to do a deeper analysis. Whereas before we might have just looked at the interview data that we collected and pulled out those themes and takeaways. Now we can kind of look deeper into the data and pull out themes and takeaways based on location or based on age or based on languages spoken. So there's further kind of analysis that we can do using generative AI. And I'll also say when we use generative AI to do those processes, we don't just rely on generative AI. Because we're in an experimental phase, we're also still doing those things manually and comparing the results of the two. And we're seeing that in both cases, there are some things that generative AI doesn't do a great job of picking up on. Generally speaking, there is consistency, but there are some things that are missed. But there are also some things when we do things in a manual human way that might not be picked up by generative AI. So actually doing them both ways kind of gives us a very complete picture in terms of an analysis.
Yeah, I think it's so important to remember that to get the most out of these tools, it really is a collaboration between the humans and the tools, because there's definitely, gaps that we have in our knowledge and in our skills, and there are gaps that these tools have in their training, in their functionality. You were talking about, all the data you're collecting. This is like incredibly informative to help you better target audiences, better understand UI, UX decisions, all sorts of ways that all this data can help generate new solutions to make the experiences better for your users. Are you doing all of the data tracking and collecting using AI specifically, or are you capturing that data from like traditional like Google Analytics sources or tracking sources, or where is that coming from?
I'm glad you're asking this question because this is a big question, I think, in higher education. In terms of the existence of data that is out there on the web for our institution and for likely institutions in general, I think we can recognize that the quality of that data is sometimes it is questionable. I think the consistency of the data that's been collected in the past, we know that it hasn't been maintained properly. And in most cases, that it hasn't been included balanced representation from our population, and that there's some issues with existing data. So at this moment, when I'm talking about using generative AI in our user research processes, we are collecting the data manually through interviews, data that is specifically connected to the goals and objectives of the project that we're working on. And that's the data that we're using in terms of doing our analysis with generative AI. I myself am not comfortable yet with the idea of being able to use data that's out there in the world on the internet to produce the results that we're looking for when we're doing our journey mapping. But I also think it's really healthy that we're recognizing those problems. And I think another thing that we're thinking about is how can we address those issues? Is there a way for us to improve the data quality that is out there in the world so that one day maybe we can do these things? And that's our responsibility too. I think we know that our students and as our staff and researchers become more used to using generative AI in their research processes, that the quality of our data in the internet, out in the interweb, needs to be more consistent and needs to be better quality. So we need to think about data governance. We need to think about cleaning up data, all those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think data governance, and I hope that data governance becomes a much larger issue once a lot of institutions start integrating AI, because you're going to notice that the results that you get, the output you get, is only as good as the data that you use to train the models. And the same with the content. If you're training these models on old, outdated, unstructured content or unstructured data, you're going to get bad results. So.
There's another interesting article or argument that I've read in a few articles, this idea of AI producing answers that are, for example, if you're looking at choices students make in terms of where their university, what university they would enroll at, if you ask AI that question, the AI can only tell you what it might, as a student might do, whereas you can ask a student what they actually have done. So that's something to consider too, is, the way that generative AI produces those answers and comes up with answers that are statistically average or general or normative or popular might not necessarily be the correct answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So tell me a little bit about your AI journey. What has that been like? Were you an early adopter, or did you have hesitancy around it? How did you get into this?
I've noticed this in our conversations with other communications folks. I feel like a lot of the times when we're having these conversations, there's a sense of technical comfort versus emotional comfort. And often people that you would think would be the most technically comfortable are also the most emotionally uncomfortable with AI. So there's always this conversation of, I think, this push and pull of knowing that as people who influence standards and best practices, we should be involved in this conversation. And also this sense of, oh, there's a lot of ickiness surrounding the potential problems with use of these technologies. So I don't want to get involved. So I think that I also struggled with those questions, but I do feel, a lot of the governance and best practices initiatives at our university, I participate in leading those initiatives. So I feel like I've always felt like it's my responsibility to be involved, and to acknowledge that I think when we're talking about all these potential problems with ethical issues, problems with lack of balanced representation, problems with impacts from the environment, impacts on the environment, that when we develop these best practices, we're not just talking about encouraging people to use AI, we're also talking about putting up guardrails about things that people shouldn't be doing using generative AI. And if we want to make sure that we avoid those issues in our institutions, then we have to be involved. So I think there's acknowledging that part of the discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I say all the time that these tools can do a lot of things, but it's up to us to decide what they should do.
Exactly.
We have to be mindful of that in all the decisions that we're making, and every place that we start integrating it, we need to be asking those questions. So it's great. What are some of the challenges you see to AI adoption within higher ed?
So we've already talked about data quality. So to me, that's the biggest one. And we're doing a lot of work at our institution to do cleanup, to consider where we need to kind of step things up in terms of data governance and cleanup of our data. I think the other problem, we've touched on it a little bit, is lack of coordination, working with silos and people not collaborating has really hindered our ability, I think, to establish best practices and to promote best practices and to be consistent about how we promote best practices. So I think those are a couple of the challenges that we're struggling with most. Also, this issue about emotional comfort, I think that's a big problem as well. There's a few things out there, but I think we're making progress in those areas.
I mean, AI adoption is not a technology project. It's a change management project. And, trying to get people on board and really getting them to not only integrate the tools into their current workflows, but to really think about why they do the work the way they do and how they might be able to change it. Because we have now new capabilities and opportunities that we didn't have before AI got put into the mix. So,
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. And I feel like further to that, identifying what you can do, there's also the what you shouldn't do. And I know I've mentioned that before, but to really focus on where are the areas that AI can help do the things that I do in my job? And where are the things that maybe AI won't be able to do? So how can I use AI to make my processes more efficient with all those things AI can do so I can focus more on those things that, are things that I uniquely bring to my position, my role.
yeah, absolutely. It's exactly right. And even thinking about like, where do we have like the opportunities for more human interaction or human engagement within our processes? Because maybe we shouldn't have AI automate those things because we need, even if it's, it might be repetitive work that could be automated, but if it creates more human connection, then, that's what we really want with our audiences. So,
Exactly.
what advice do you have for institutions that are just getting started with AI?
Get over that hesitation by acknowledging that you're not just thinking about encouraging people to use AI, you're also thinking about helping people identify where they shouldn't be using AI and where they can use AI. That might help you be more comfortable in the way that you promote AI in your institution. Learning and experimenting and acknowledging that you're learning and experimenting and being comfortable with that is also a good thing. You don't have to have all the answers right away. And I think that that's probably an issue too. I think we as subject matter experts in our institutions are often feel that we need to be able to speak as experts right off the get-go. This isn't that moment. I think this is the moment where we're all learning and that's okay. When you're experimenting, it's not necessarily you saying, this is something you should do. It's you saying this is something we're experimenting with. We don't have all the answers yet, but we'll be able to tell you, hopefully through these experiments, where, we can use AI to be more efficient and where we will not want to use AI. So yeah, those things.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
feel
I mean,
comforted, be comfortable.
yeah. And you talked about having those guidelines. And I think those are so important for institutions to have out there and to circulate so that people know that they can use these tools and they can play and it's okay to fail. And that's part of the process. And I think there's so much shadow AI usage going on, at institutions where people don't want to admit that they're using it to do their work because they're afraid that, they're not going to be allowed to once that comes out. So I think letting people know in your institution that it's okay, we're experimenting, we're playing. Even the engineers that created the tools don't know all the ways to use them. So, how are we expected to know all the ways? What are some of the most interesting use cases you've seen or heard about from other institutions or across your institution?
We talk about potential uses of AI to improve experiences for example, people with disabilities or people who are non-native language speakers. A couple of months ago, we had an interesting conversation with a couple of researchers who are working with one of our community members who has a disability and who uses language boards to communicate. So they're using AI to generate more tailored language boards that are specific to the conversations that are being had. So that's, I think, the most interesting conversation that I've had about how AI is being used. But just in general, I think this idea of making people's experiences easier through use of AI. I think these are some of the ways that I'm most interested. I mentioned that we are a bilingual environment. So I've heard, I haven't seen it, but I've heard people comment about meetings where people are using transcription in their native language to be able to participate in the conversation. Because some of the conversations that we have in our work environment are in both French and English. Many people that work at McGill are comfortable in both French and English, but not everyone is completely comfortable, or maybe people speak a third language that could be brought into the mix. So there's lots of interesting, I think, multi-language uses for generative AI as well. Those are just a few of the things that I found interesting.
Yeah, and those are great, and those are things that a lot of institutions that don't have bilingual audiences or predominantly bilingual audiences just don't think about. I think the translation capabilities are enormous. I think the language barrier is definitely going to change due to AI integration, and then the accessibility usage, I mean, that you talked about. I think so many of these AI tools aren't good at accessibility or even remove like standard accessibility opportunities. So I think, having different tools or different solutions that will help all of those, various audiences consume our content and better communicate and understand and interact. I think those are going to be a huge unlock for, all higher ed institutions specifically, but everyone in all the audiences that we deal with. So it's great. So as marketers, as admissions personnel, enrollment, alumni, as we're all thinking about how to integrate these tools, what can we do? What skills can we develop to help us, help us prepare for the impact that these tools are going to have on our roles, or that this technology is going to have on the jobs that we do?
I think experimenting, which is something that is in our nature to do as people that work in this industry, continue to do that, continue to consider how you can use generative AI in a lot of all the processes that you do, and to play around a little bit and see how it works, compare the results of your manual work with work that's being done using generative AI, so that you can see where it's working well, where it's not working well. I think those are good things to do. And I also think when I was reflecting on this question, I thought about the idea of what is it that you bring that is unique to who you are? Why were you hired for this role? What is it that you do that is your expertise? Because AI will make it possible for you to grow in those areas, in those ways that you bring unique things to your role that AI potentially couldn't do. So those are the things that I think are the areas where you can look to expand and grow. There's a definition that Jutta Treviranus uses. Jutta Treviranus is a researcher who was the chair of, and we have legal guidelines from the Canadian government on accessible AI, generative AI uses. And one of the things that she points out, which talks about AI, is that generative AI produces content that is, or produces answers that are popular or normative or statistically average. And one of the things that I think about in that definition is, in some of the ways, in some of the work that I do produce work and solutions, or I look to produce solutions that are popular, normative, statistically average. And generative AI can help me in those tasks and in that work that I do. But I also do work that is focused on producing solutions that aren't statistically average. These are the things where I'm supposedly the expert, and I bring those things that are unique to my personality to the work that I do. That's where I think there's going to be great growth and great ability for us to really focus on those things and make those things more a part of what we produce and how we work in our institutions. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, the capability of AI to amplify our expertise or to work with us, to collaborate with us, to help us amplify our expertise, it's enormous. Talking about the future, what do you think? Where do you think AI is going to go in the next year or two? Or what are you most excited about capabilities or impact that it's going to have on our work?
I do think there's a lot of cleanup we need to do before we're really ready in a position to be able to leverage all these benefits that AI can give us. And in that time, I think our use of AI adoption won't be huge or shouldn't be huge, because I do feel like if we do rush into it at this point, it's going to be a garbage in, garbage out situation. So I really think we need to work on cleaning things up. We need to think about establishing best practices, establishing better governance, data governance, and making sure that when we're encouraging people in our institution to use generative AI, that we're really focusing on those positive, beneficial uses and that we're really promoting and highlighting those uses. And maybe at this point, those uses will be, repetitive, maybe mundane, not super interesting, but it'll give us an opportunity for us to make our processes more efficient and also to learn to use generative AI in a positive way. So I think that over the next 1 to 2 years, I think, the wheel turns slowly in our industry. We're going to be doing a lot of cleanup. We've got a lot of ground foundational work to do. But I think once we get all of that into place, that there could be a lot of benefits for some really exciting things.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I think we take more of that repetitive work off of our plates, that's going to give us more time to hopefully focus on the really important issues of governance and data cleanliness. So I always finish off the interviews by asking people what's the use case that is most important or most beneficial to you in your job?
For generative AI, well, I am doing this presentation about how we're using it to improve our user research. As I mentioned, with understanding this definition of generative AI producing answers that are statistically average, normative, popular. Obviously, this lends itself to improving, I think, our processes for user research and analyzing data under the understanding that we're collecting that data at this moment in a manual way from people directly. And I feel like that is the most useful use case. I think there's a lot of potential for improving formatting and consistency throughout our organization in our digital content. And I think in terms of that kind of mundane work that we were talking about, that's where there's the biggest area for improvement. For example, in those thousands of program pages that we have, all the content that we produce about our courses, we can more easily make that content consistent and user-friendly using generative AI. So I think there's a lot of potential for that kind of cleanup, which is good.
Absolutely. Joyce, this has been a fantastic conversation. If our users want to reach out and connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so connect with me there. It's LinkedIn, Joyce.Peralta.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for coming on the show, sharing your insights and your knowledge and all the great use cases, and look forward to getting in touch with you again in the future and hearing about how everything's going.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks again for inviting me.
I love that conversation. Joyce's emphasis on the importance of data quality and governance reminds us that rushing to implement AI without addressing foundational issues can lead to a garbage in, garbage out situation that undermines the technology's potential benefits. McGill's location in Montreal and Joyce's work in accessibility showcase new ways to think about integrating these tools into translation processes and finding new ways to make our content available to all of our audiences. What resonated with me most was her balanced perspective on the opportunities and limitations of AI. I love that they're comparing AI and human analysis of user journey data to validate the results and help define where the technology adds value and where human expertise remains essential. Joyce's distinction between work that should be statistically average, where AI excels, versus uniquely human expertise highlights an important principle for AI education professionals. AI should free us to focus on the distinctive value we bring to our institutions and not replace the human connection at the heart of education. As always, please reach out to me with unique ways that you're integrating AI into your professional and personal lives. Blue skies, and keep creating. Thank you for listening to another episode of AI for You. I hope you found at least one useful thing you can take away and start adding to your workflows and processes today. Remember, the key to making the most of AI is to keep experimenting, keep learning, and of course, keep creating. AI for You is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Kadu, Day Kibbles, Shane Baglini, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.